sometimes you don't need role models. You recognize this gentleman? His story is fascinating. It's a fascinating story. He was given up for adoption. His biological father is a Syrian.
Yes.
And there's a whole story behind this whole thing, and of course, clearly, and when you read about his childhood, he was such a troublemaker, blowing up firecrackers, doing this, and so all over the place. But then he found his thing, and all of you have his stuff in your pockets. And so sometimes, there are folks who are just born to create. They don't need any supervisors. They don't need any. But these are rare exceptions. Let me talk about a few role models, and then we'll close off. My role models, who influenced me. Ahmad Al-Qadi. When I finished my training, and I was in academics, so I started writing stuff and sending stuff to present at various meetings, and ran into this gentleman, originally from Syria, who was the program director and the head of Islamic Medical Association of North America, Ahmad Al-Qadi. And I walk into this place for one of my first presentations in a professional organization, and I see this man running from table to the front office, to the screen, to running the projector, registering the people. Ahmad Al-Qadi, the president. There was very little staff, and he did pretty much everything by himself. So he set an example for me as a very junior person at that time, walking into this hall to make a presentation with my slides, and as if I was the biggest authority in the world. And here's this guy who's way ahead of me, doing all this work. And so, plus, very cheerful, always a smile, and an innovator, thinker. He set the stage for establishing what is now the Federation of Islamic Medical Associations of the world. Okay? In a small conference, he said, look, we are in America, we are blessed, we have this, we have this, we have this. Let's create a model that we have developed here and duplicate it around the world. So now we have about 47 countries which have Islamic medical associations. And Ahmad was one of the pioneers for this. Very tolerant, very optimistic. We would say, yeah, Ahmad, this is not right. This is, yeah Allah. It will happen. It will happen. Patience, sabr. And so Ahmad was a great guy. And there have been other teachers also who along the way, I listed them at the bottom. Let's see. Milan, for example. Let me talk about Milan. I was a resident in a Jewish hospital in New York. Milan used to make rounds with us. He was the chairman of medicine. And he very quickly picked me out of the pack and started kind of bringing me to his office and this and that. And eventually I became the head of the chest division in that hospital. And I had a run-in with my chief of medicine, Fred Rosner. On some policy issues we did not agree. There were 3 specific incidents. And the issue went to Milan, who was the head of the entire operation. And 3 times he came in my favor. 3 times. Not once, but 3 times. So here's an example of somebody who saw what we call, justice. He felt that he was dealing the matter in a just manner, although he kind of rejected what his own chairman of medicine was recommending. Nathan Serif, the gentleman who pulled me as a PGY2, says, you're going to be a chest doctor. You're going to work with me. Those days all we knew about COPD and asthma. The ventilators were just beginning, everything was, we set up the first respiratory ICU in the country, so on and so forth. But again, he pulled me from the pack. He saw something, I don't know what he saw, but he pulled me, he says, you're going to work with me. Roger Bone, one of the best presenters I've ever encountered. And he passed away. Roger was a good friend, a colleague, a pulmonologist. But his presentations were always so interesting, so interesting. So these are some of the folks who have had an impact on me in different ways. There's Ahmad Al-Qadi being honored by Islamic Medical Association. And he unfortunately developed Parkinson's and he passed away recently. So he was being honored by the community for his contributions. Next role model for me, Muhammad Ali, the boxer. Now you'd say, oh, okay, because he's a great boxer. No, not because he's a great boxer, but what he did. And let me share that with you. He refused to serve in the US Army. He was at the peak of his professional career. And they told him, come to the army, we'll put you in some station, entertain the troops, and you'll be fine. He said, no, this is not a just war. I'm not going to serve. So, what did the government do? They stripped him of his boxing title, and basically he was left jobless, poor. And consequences, he refused, he lost his livelihood. And the case went to the court, all the way. From all the courts, it went to the Supreme Court of the United States, and 8-0, they favored him against the US government. However, during that time, he had lost about 3-4 years of his peak professional career. Then he came back again, and I'm sure many of you know about his, he won the title not once but twice. So why did I pick him as a role model? Because he reminded me of this verse. For a believer, if you see something wrong, you have to stand up, even if it's against your own family, against yourself. Truth and justice. And they couldn't. Now, you know, as history developed, in the last Olympics held in the United States, Muhammad Ali was given the torch to light the whole Olympic flame. So he was given that distinction. So from where he was to where he went, and in between, he stood for justice. He said, none of the Vietnamese have killed me, so why am I fighting there so far away? They haven't attacked me, they haven't attacked us, it's not an unjust war. So we rarely see these kinds of folks. And now the next, I think I got 4 or 5 of them, so a little bit about science also I need to put in. National Institutes of Health is the largest research organization in the world. It's based in Maryland, Bethesda, Maryland, and it supports pretty much all the major research in the United States, even in some overseas countries. What's interesting here is the vision established by some folks who have long gone. This gentleman, no relation to the present Bush, okay, stated, scientific progress is one essential key to our security as a nation, to our better health, to more jobs, to higher standard of living, and to our cultural progress. Invest in scientific progress. Okay. This is in a long time ago, this gentleman put this out there. And the 2 presidents in the United States who established the research enterprise as we see existing in the United States now are the 2 presidents were Lincoln and Roosevelt. Now what's interesting about both of them, they were the presidents during war. Both of them. The Civil War, when Lincoln was the president, when the North and the South were fighting, and Roosevelt during World War II. So in spite of this major problem of a war, they said we have to invest in scientific discovery and establish National Institutes of Health, Academy of Medicine, so on and so forth. And why am I talking about all this? Because of this gentleman, who is also one of my role models. Elias Zerhouni was the first Muslim director of the National Institutes of Health. Just about the only good thing that George Bush did was appoint him as the director of NIH. Okay? And we had the pleasure of inviting him here. He visited King Fahd several times. And listen to his story. It's something very interesting. I profiled him in one of the magazines, and this is what he sent. He was one of 8 children in a small mountain town of Nadroma, which is located on the western border of French Algeria. His father taught him physics and mathematics, His uncle was a radiologist. He got interested in radiology. He went to med school, and at the age of 24, he was sent on a 3-month scholarship to Johns Hopkins. That's his brief bio. Then what happened? He was a mathematician, thinking. He went to his chairman, and radiology chairman, I forget his name, and told him, I have this idea. If we can measure the calcium content in a nodule, which you see on a chest x-ray, we might be able to sort out what is malignant and what is benign. Instead of being told that you are a crazy foreigner who's come here for 3 months and get lost, his chairman said, go ahead and do it. Okay? So he discovered what we called Hounsfield units. So if you measure on a chest x-ray the calcium content, you can predict who needs surgery, who doesn't need surgery. Okay? So because of that discovery, he was moved up, he stayed, he became the faculty member at Hopkins, he became the chairman of medicine, he became the dean, and then George Bush pulled him up as director of NIH. Okay? And he stayed there for several years. And then he says, my work in medicine at NIH is all about my belief in Islam, and continue the honorable tradition set by the folks I mentioned. And he felt welcome. He was encouraged, and he excelled, and he produced. And so this is an example of an immigrant who came to the United States, made some major contributions, and was recognized for it, and was rewarded for it. I'll let you read this, and then I'll move on to my next role model.